You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Cricket Podcast, where we will be previewing the 2021 IPL. We'll be releasing a show a day from the 31st of March through to the 8th of April, previewing each team, and then, if we're lucky and we sort out the technology, a live stream Q&A the day before the tournament kicks off. I'm Jack Hope, and today I'm joined by Ross Legg.
Hello.
I'm joined by Max Brown.
Hello.
And I'm joined by Dan Weston.
Hello.
And we will be starting with the Rajasthan Royals. But before we do, Ross, a few quick messages for our listeners.
Yep, if you're watching us on YouTube, you should like and subscribe and click the little bell button. If you want to follow us on social media, on Twitter and Instagram, follow us at The Cricket Pod. And if you're listening on podcast platforms, follow us and subscribe and leave us a review.
Great then. So the Rajasthan Royals, they are a team from the north of India. A little bit on Rajasthan before we get into the cricket,
Yes,
because we need some context setting here, don't we? Did you know that the world's oldest ever ploughed field can be found in the state of Rajasthan, which gives it a claim to being the geographic site of the world's first human civilization? That is pretty awesome, boys. That is pretty awesome. If you don't, if that doesn't tickle your fancy though, and maybe you're into martial tradition, armies and stuff, you can also find 45 forts across the state, or more than 45 forts, 6 of which are UNESCO heritage sites. Thrilling.
I'm excited already by this. This is what you get with the Cricket Podcast. Sometimes you're going to get cricket. Sometimes we're going to talk about forts. Who knows?
Let's get on to the cricket. The Rajasthan Royals themselves, they're a bit rubbish. They were the last place team last year, although the tournament was fairly tight, so they weren't the worst team we've ever seen in the IPL. Just the worst team we saw in 2020. They are captained this year by Sanju Samson after getting rid of Steve Smith. They wear a kind of hot pink blue fade. I think they call it a sunrise pattern as their kit. And we don't know who their coach is. They fired their coach 3 days after the auction. A great move. A hallmark of many fantastic sporting organisations. At the auction, though, they were pretty big movers. I said already that they got rid of Steve Smith. In came Chris Morris, the biggest buy at the 2020 auction. Immediately following that, Ross, we thought that the Rajasthan Royals were going to be in better shape this year. Has anything changed that?
I think a certain absence of Jofra Archer, who cut his hand on a fish tank, or cleaning his fish tank, is the story as it goes. His absence has been ruled out for the whole of the IPL, and he carried that Rajasthan Royals team. Like, you can talk about Joss Butler, you can talk about Ben Stokes, you can talk about Tawatia, but ultimately Jofra Archer was the only reason that they didn't seemingly get battered every single game. Him being out is a major loss.
He's been ruled out for the first half. We're still waiting to hear whether or not he might be allowed to play the last half, but I would suggest there's no point by then.
Oh, quite possibly. I think most of the rumours are that he won't be about, a combination of that elbow injury and the operation that he's going to have on his finger because he smashed a fish tank, ruling him out. Which, possibly leaves Rajasthan back in the position that they were in prior to this season, a team with just one bowler. Dan, you're a cricket analyst. Is there anyone in this Rajasthan team beyond Chris Morris who could, step up and possibly save the day for them?
I think it's really difficult. Mustafiza, maybe, as like if you go back to the 2016-2017 version of Mustafiza, the artist formerly known as, he could do that, but it's a big ask. He's not the same type of player. And I think also Archer's, it's not just your bowling you're replacing. He's massively improved as a lower order hitter, and I think that's extremely useful to have, especially for a team like Rajasthan who had really awful stability with the bat last season, frequently lost 3 wickets passing the power play. Having that extra depth is really critical, and they've lost that as well. So far from ideal. They don't really have a like-for-like replacement, really. Morris, again, he's a hitter, pace hitter at the death, but he's more of a death bowler. Archer, be more of a 2-2 bowler or a 1-1-2 bowler kind of thing. That's what I call it in terms of phases. They're not quite the same, and they had the worst economy and 30 balls per wicket roughly in the power play last year. And they've lost Archer and gained Morris, so it's probably not ideal in that respect.
I think they're probably downgraded. Although, on paper, and you'll probably hear this once or twice, probably from English commentators on the IPL. If you look at some of their headline players, so I'm thinking here, Butler, Stokes, Morris, Sanju Samson, even Rahul Tewatia, they don't necessarily look awful, do they, Max?
No, they do have what I think seem to have gleaned from their teams. They've got lots of sort of like okay all rounders. You've got you mentioned Tewatia. They've also got Shreyas Gopal, and they brought in Shivam Dubey as well. So there's like a sort of middle order there of like people who aren't too bad. But I think it's just a sort of a case of you need, particularly with your homegrown players, you need a couple of real stars in there to be able to take you that extra level. And I think aside from Samson, they're really sort of struggling in that regard compared to a lot of the other teams in the IPL.
Yeah, a pretty good summary. They're sort of one of those teams that you look at on paper and you think, yeah, they're pretty good. But then you realise later that you only looked at the top 4 names on the paper. And the bottom 7 names are nobodies. And then suddenly you're in the 20th over and it's like Unad Cat bowling Kyron Pollard. and like Pollard becomes the first batter in world history to hit a ball through the sound barrier. I guess Chris Morris as well. He is a good bowler, and sort of Dan, as you said, one of the better death bowlers you can find in world cricket. But over the last few years, he's missed 5, 10, and 5 matches from the IPL. Which isn't fantastic for like the guy that your whole team now has to rely on. Is it, Ross?
It's not great. And the supporting cast, as you say, just isn't there to back them up. But they do have a couple of youngsters, right, who potentially could, maybe fit some of the gaps. So is it Tyagi, one of the pace bowlers that they've got? I mean, he didn't have a great IPL 20, but actually, rarely youngsters do. So maybe the second time round, a bit more experience, a bit more of a leading role in that attack, and maybe we'll see a little bit more from him.
Yeah. I mean, if you're lucky, and I guess, Ross, that segues really nicely onto the young stars, because not in addition to sort of the big players, we do want to talk about some of the youngsters, and there are a lot at Rajasthan. 8 of their 25 players are aged 23 or younger. However, I think if you scratch the surface a little bit here, they might not be as rich in this area as that particular stat will suggest. Dan, as an analyst, of those players in that under 23 bracket, are there any cricketers we should be particularly excited by, do you think?
Not overwhelmingly. I like Tyagi, like Ross said, in terms of the future upside, but whether he can actually produce that in the coming tournament immediately at this stage, 20 years old, is another matter entirely. And I think this is kind of goes back to the problems with franchise league team building compared to, say, county cricket, because with county cricket, it's probably a pretty good strategy would be to bring young players in and let them develop and then integrate them into the team as and when you feel necessary. But with a 14-game franchise season, which Rajasthan probably will only play 14 games, there's a slight issue with that, especially when you've got a mega auction next year. You can only retain a few players. So having that emphasis on youth in franchise cricket is probably a little bit overrated. And I think there's probably the right balance to find somewhere between Rajasthan and CSK, arguably, you'd say. And the other thing I'd say about Rajasthan's squad is it looks really unbalanced to me in terms of the money that they spent on overseas players compared to the money they spend on locals. So I just added them up quickly, roughly in my head, about 45 crore on overseas players, which is over half their budget on overseas players when they can only play 4 at one time. And all of these young players for Rajasthan, they're all cheap. Sanju Samson's the only player who's gone for over 3 crore at auction in their group. So it goes to sort of tells you the story that they're a team of overseas highly paid superstars, and then they've not got a lot in their terms of their local talent depth, basically.
Yeah, there's a couple of players that might be worth watching out for. But as the point you make, Dan, about picking youngsters for sort of to develop them for no reason to then put them back in the auction pool later and not benefit from that, does stand. Obviously, there's Jaiswal, who was the captain of the under-19s World Cup team. In fact, he might not have been the captain, but he was the top run scorer in the under-19s World Cup about 18 months ago. Ryan Parag, he managed to play 12 games last year and scored an almighty 86 runs in total. And Kartik Tyagi, as Ross said, he played 10 matches and, came return figures or returns an economy rate of 9.6 and over. Probably one of them will get better, so keep an eye out. But it is a bit of a thin squad, as you say, Dan. There's a lot resting on some players who just haven't shown to this point in time that they are capable of delivering in probably the biggest or highest quality annual cricket tournament in the world. There are 3 English players, Max: Livingston, Butler and Stokes. For a lot of England fans, Rajasthan are kind of the team they follow because there's a few English players knocking around. Will you be excited to see them in action at least?
Always exciting to see Jos Buttler in action in T20s. He's a phenomenal player, especially when he's opening the batting. So he will be great to watch. Obviously, Archer not being there is always a disappointment because he equally with the ball is just as exciting. And Ben Stokes, there's a lot of murmuring, isn't there, at the moment about, at least from us, I don't know about everyone else, about how good Stokes actually is at T20 cricket. So he will be, especially given that he's one of their big stars and the thinness of the squad, as we've mentioned, all eyes on Ben Stokes to see if he can sort of step up and maybe drag Rajasthan Royals up the table a little bit. Liam Livingstone's an interesting one because I think obviously he's not gonna play because we're suffering here from Rajasthan and their imbalanced a set of overseas players, but I was wondering whether there might be a sort of outside option with Archer out of bringing in sort of one of the younger bowlers and just throwing them in as a punt, and maybe chucking in Liam Livingstone or even David Miller as bolstering the batting order a bit. You've got there's Akash Singh, who was part of the Indian World Cup team, the under-19s, and Chetan Sakaria, who they've spent a reasonable amount of money on for an unproven player.
Well, I think Max Livingston definitely is going to benefit from Dan Weston's famous recency bias. Like him doing okay in the ODIs will put his stock up, right? And I think it makes him a contender to come into that side, I think.
Right.
On that subject, though, I like him a lot, and I would have him above Miller.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
With the bowling option, he's just a better 6 hitter. He's more of an aggressive player. So, he showed that in the ODIs as well when he finally got the opportunity to play for England.
Who would be really good to maybe talk to about that fact, and who probably would have some input into picking the team? The coach. and they don't have one. So who knows? Who knows who's going to be making those decisions come match day? They have actually managed to win the tournament once. A lot of negativity so far, but back in 2008, under Shane Warne, the greatest cricketer and the greatest cricketing mind who ever lived, they did take home the tournament. I think the inaugural edition of the IPL. So well done for that. 13 years ago. One of the teams, they are also one of the teams who got caught up in the famous spot fixing scandal. A couple of their players banned for life for that, and they decided not to pick up the third Srisanth at this year's auction, which is a great shame. Their chances,
They could have done with him as well.
They probably could have, yeah. At least they could have made some money out of this whole endeavour if they had a guy like Srisanth and his connections. Their chances for this season 8 or 9 to 1, which shows you how crap the odds you get from bookmakers are. Because there are actually only 8 teams in the tournament, and even though Rajasthan are one of the two outsiders, they're still only 8 to 1. I mean, to be honest, fellas, I think Jofra Archer being out gives them kind of the exact same problem as last year, in that they'll only have one top level bowling option in Chris Morris, and he might not even be there all the time. You've all talked about how their local players or their Indian players aren't very good, and I think they were well made points. I do, however, think that they'll feel sad that their well-made plans at the auction, because I think Chris Morris and Jofra Archer solved some of the problems that they had as a duo, and that's been completely undermined by a fish tank. So they are going to be sad about that.
It doesn't sound any less ridiculous every time you say it.
No, it's good. Hopefully we'll have time to get it in once or twice more. Dan, you kind of talked about the balance in this side and how there's not too much stability in the top 6. I can almost feel the fingers twitching from some commenters who will be talking about their top 4, which will probably include Butler, Stokes, and Sanju Samson. What do you mean about instability? Because that doesn't sound like an awful top 4.
Yeah, okay, so I talk about it from like a balls per dismissal basis. So overall in the competition, Rajasthan averaged around 18 balls per dismissal in the comp last year, which is the second worst in the entire tournament. And they had the lowest stability in the power play at around 17 balls per dismissal. So if you compare that to CSK, for example, they had 24 balls per dismissal in the power play. And Punjab had, where is it? Well, they had 23 balls per dismissal for the entire tournament. So Rajasthan just have lower figures for balls per dismissal. That leads to pressure down the order. It means that they need to have more depth because they're frequently 7 or 8 down before the death, or 3-4 down in the power play, and that means that they've got to rebuild in the middle. They can't take chances, and it's just a poor position to be in on a regular basis. So I don't mind having mediocre stability as long as you've got the depth and the lower order hitters. If you back to 10 with hitters, if you have like, I don't know, not that you can play in the IPL, but like Hassan Ali, Rashid Khan, and like Archer at like 8, 9, and 10, there's no drama at all. You could just hit and hit and hit and hit. But if you have like Shreyas Gopal, who can bat but he can't hit, and Tyagi and Adkat or whatever as 8, 9, 10, you've got more problems. So it's all about the balance and having those trade-offs. And we'll talk about, in another of the previews, we'll talk about KKR and that implication as well. And I think that when you're building a squad, you have to take all these factors into consideration. If you've got a team of hitters, you've got to have the extra depth. If you have a pinch hitter, you've got to have extra depth. And there's knock-on effects to everything. And I don't think that Rajasthan necessarily have worked that one out as well as they could do so far.
That's very well my point. Max, I'm going to throw this question over to you because you're the brains behind the outfit. It is the IPL, and crazy things do happen. So can you use your mega mind to explain to us how Rajasthan could maybe sneak into 5th place or even 3rd place?
Yeah, what would happen is Josh Butler wouldn't get out in the entire tournament, and then your sort of balls per dismissal thing solved, isn't it? Because if Butler's just batting for 20 overs, the runs are there, and then you can rely on Chris Morris at the death to make sure that whatever team they're facing can't quite get over the line when they inevitably take all the other bowlers to the cleaners. It's going to take, basically what I'm saying, without being glib, is like their star players are going to have to step up and perform for 80-90% of the games, and if that happened, it's not impossible, but that's obviously a very, very unlikely occurrence.
I think it could be a good thing for England. So I think Joss Butler and Ben Stokes opening up in that kind of, Ben Stokes at least at number 3. Stokes is probably going to have to bowl as an opening bowler potentially in those, or at least some of those phases. And he was pretty bad for England in the T20. So hopefully this is an opportunity to see a bit of improvement.
Yeah, you don't necessarily see much of him as an opener, do you? So maybe there's a niche for him to carve out.
I think there's one other possible route to victory for the Rajasthan Royals. No, that's the route to cash. We've already discovered that. Discussed that, and remember they didn't pick up 3 cents, so they're in to the underworld. Isn't there? Shreyas Gopal didn't have a great season last year, but has had okay seasons in the past. So if he reverts back to not bad Shreyas Gopal, that's the spin problem solved. Rahul Tewatia has shown some signs that he's quite a dynamic cricketer. So maybe if he has another good year, they'll be all right. But then, yeah, Max, it does still all come back to that reality that Stokes, Butler and Morris probably have to do quite a lot between them. Last question on them, and then we'll wrap up this section, is how would you go about beating them, Dan, in a couple of sentences? What's important to focus on when you play the Rajasthan Royals?
I think just maintaining that power play, attacking dynamic against them, putting them under pressure early is really quite critical. It depends how they structure up, because I think I've been pretty strong on the fact that Butler and Stokes are probably their best 2 openers. I would bat Stokes right up the order. But then where do you bat Jaiswal? And then who do you have in the middle order, which makes life difficult. Obviously, you've got Samson as well, but there's that problem. Unbalanced lineup. Doob, Parag, 5-6 maybe doesn't really inspire me either. So I think if you make inroads early, so use your best bowlers early, take early wickets against them, put them under pressure. If you can get them 3 down after 6-7 overs, then you're exposing that middle order. Then you get Morris in quicker as well, and he's a poor striker of spin compared to pace. So Rajasthan would really ideally do is to hold back him and Tewatia to be like 15th, 16 over onwards hitters. Both of them have quite similar dynamic in that respect. And if you can expose them earlier, then it creates a lot of problems for Rajasthan. So taking those wickets early is critical. And I think that they're going to probably be a team with low confidence after last year as well. They're quite a young team as well. So starting quickly, getting on top of them just generally with bat and ball is pretty critical in my opinion.
We've got a couple of Twitter questions to actually finish off on then. Ross, can you explain how Rajasthan Royals have managed to beat Mumbai Indians in recent years, given that they're probably the worst team against the best team?
Every dog has its day, right? That's just is the crux of it, I think. So sometimes they've still got some great players, right? Having a Joss Butler, having a Ben Stokes, that you've seen those guys go off and have a day out, as the Aussies say. And when they've had someone like Jofra Archer in there as well, it makes it's a different kind of game. T20 as well. Regardless of Mumbai Indians are probably the best franchise in world cricket at the moment, and there is a big thing around the luck factor that's in play. There's so many, it's such a small margin for error in all of this kind of elite level cricket that anything can happen.
And Max, one for you from Vinay. How much of a miss is Jofra Archer going to be for the Rajasthan Royals on a scale of 1 to 10?
Well, I'll do it on a different scale. Of basically, I think it takes them from potentially being able to challenge for the playoffs to not having a chance of getting into the playoffs.
Yeah, that is a better scale for this conversation. So well done, Max, there. Why should you support the Rajasthan Royals? We'll finish on that. One, if you like criminals, it's a good sport fixing scandal they were caught up in. Two, if you want to support England, you probably want to go with the Royals. If you like Shane Warne, and if you're a real man and therefore wear pink. Let's wrap this up. And we will move on to the Chennai Super Kings.
You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
I think it was a disgraceful performance, and I think it should never be permitted to happen again.
That is very good.